In this lesson, we're going to look at how to answer correctly questions 1 to 3 of the Unit 2 Specimen 2 NAB for Higher Maths. So the first question you get is this: a function f is defined by the formula f of x equals x cubed take away 5x squared take away 8x plus 12, where x is a real number. Firstly, show that x minus 1 is a factor of f of x. So we'll tackle this first. Now, this is a synthetic division question. You're trying to show that this is a factor of this function here. So if this is a factor, it means that x equals 1 is a root. The reason for that is because it makes the bracket equal to 0. So outside our synthetic division table, we're going to use 1 because it's a root of this here. Now, to get your values at the top, you take your coefficients. The first value of coefficient is 1 in front of the x cubed, so we put a 1 here. Next value in front of the x squared is negative 5. Then we have negative 8 in front of the x. And finally we have plus 12. So to show that x minus 1 is a factor, we put 1 through the synthetic division table and the remainder should come out to be 0 if it's a factor. So drop your 1 down to here and then multiply these two together. So 1 times 1 is 1. Then add, negative 5 add 1 is negative 4. Then multiply by 1 to get negative 4. And then add, negative 8 add negative 4 is negative 12. And then multiply by the 1 to get negative 12. Then add to get 0. So that bit there is worth the first mark. And then a statement basically saying, since the remainder equals 0, x equals 1 is a root, and therefore x minus 1 is a factor. That gets your 2 marks here. Part B says, hence fully factorise. So to factorise this, basically in the first question we've got the first bracket. We're just trying to put this into brackets. So the first bracket is x minus 1. The next bracket you get from the bottom here, which is really called quotient. This is the coefficient of your x squared terms, this is the coefficient of x, and this is your number at the end. So we can say that this function here goes into the first bracket there, x minus 1, and then this, coefficient of x squared, coefficient of x, and then your number value at the end. Now it says here fully factorised, so this is not fully factorised. We can keep the x minus 1 at the start, but split this into double brackets. So it's going to be a 3 and a 4 at the end, or a 6 and a 2. Now a 3 and a 4 at the end to make 12, that's fine, but you can't work with the 3 and 4 to make the 4, so it must be 6 and 2. Negative 6x plus 2x to get your negative 4x in the middle there. So there's your 2 marks here for these 2 marks. And finally we have to solve the function equal to 0, so let that equal to 0 in part C. So if that equals 0, like this, then what we're saying, because that's equal to 0 and this part here is exactly the same as this bit here, then we can set the brackets equal to 0, which is much easier to solve. So that's really what we're doing. We're taking part B and setting the answer to part B equal to 0. Then to solve it, you just need to make the individual brackets 0. Either that comes to 0, that comes to 0, or that comes to 0. Because any bracket being 0 will multiply, and it doesn't really matter what the other ones become, you'll get an answer of 0. So the first one's going to be 1, x is 1, then x is 6, and then x is minus 2. Okay, moving on to question 2. Solve the cubic equation f of x equals 0, given the following. So to solve this equation, basically we're trying to find out where the graph cuts the x-axis, because that's where f of x is equal to 0. So at the first bullet point, when f of x is divided by x plus 3, the remainder is 0. So that means x plus 3 is a factor, but it also, more importantly, means that x equals negative 3 is a root, and a root is where the graph cuts the x-axis. So minus 3 is your first answer, x equals minus 3. Next bullet point, when the graph of y equals f of x is drawn, it passes through the point negative 2, 0. Now negative 2, 0 is also a root, because that lies in the x-axis. So there's your next answer. X is negative 2. And lastly, x minus 5 is a factor, so that's just the same as the top bit. X equals 5 is a root. So that's your answer. Okay, so that gives you your hashtag mark for 2.2. You need to get all of these right to get that mark. And finally, question 3. The graph of the function f of x equals kx squared, take away 6x plus 4, does not touch or cross the x-axis. What are the range of values for k? So this is a discriminant question. We're trying to find out a range for k, and we're also told that the function does not cross the x-axis. So that means it has no roots. So because the graph has no roots, the discriminant is going to be less than 0. It's going to come out as a negative. So if we look at our a, b and c values for the discriminant, a is your coefficient of x squared, which is k. b is negative 6. And c is 4. So if we sub these values into this discriminant here, inequality, then you should be able to find a range of values for k. So sub b in, you're going to get negative 6 squared, take away 4 times k times 4. That's going to look like this. And that's going to be less than 0, and that's your first mark here, your hashtag mark. To sort this out, we'll get our second mark. So negative 6 squared is 36. Take away 4 times k times 4. That's really take away 16k, and that's less than 0. So there's a number of ways to do this. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to take away 36 from both sides. I'm then going to divide. I'm going to divide both sides by 4, so that's going to be negative 9. And this wee thing with inequalities, when you've got a negative in both sides, when you have an equation like that, if you've got negative, excuse my writing, I'm using the mouse, negative 2x equals negative 8, oh it's a big negative, then you can basically say that divide negative 8 by negative 2 and x is going to be 4. That's fine with equation work, but with inequality work, when you divide by negatives, to get rid of the negatives on both sides, you have to switch the inequality sign round. So if we're saying that k is less than negative 9 over negative 4, and k is less than 9 over 4, because we're doing it with both sides, we have to switch the inequality sign so it becomes 9 over 4. So it's fine to divide the negative 9 by the negative 4, and that becomes positive 9 over 4, but switch your inequality sign round. If you want to look at why that is, I don't have time just now, but if you look back at level 4 inequalities, you'll see why.